Hi, I'm Elena. I'm 29 years old, and I'm a junior interior designer living in the city. For a long time, I thought the only way to get rich was to skip lunch and save every receipt. I was wrong. This is the story of how I stopped counting pennies and started building wealth. Day 1. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to Mindset Money on YouTube. We appreciate it and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comments section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Now, let's start the story. Have you ever felt like you were digging a hole with a spoon while everyone else had a shovel? That was my life. I was working 60 hours a week, terrified of spending $5 on a sandwich, believing that if I just suffered enough, the universe would owe me a fortune. But money doesn't care about your suffering. It cares about your value. It took a broken lease, a mysterious millionaire, and a terrifying risk to teach me that. And once I learned it, everything changed. Chapter 1. The setup, the treadmill of scarcity. The alarm on my phone didn't just wake me up, it felt like a sentence. 6 a.m. Again. I rolled over, the springs of my mattress digging into my ribs. It was a second-hand mattress I'd bought off a guy on Craigslist 3 years ago. Every morning, my backache reminded me of the $50 I had saved by not buying a new one. I shuffled into the kitchen of the apartment I shared with Jess. The linoleum was peeling at the corners, curling up like dried leaves. Jess was already there, pouring hot water over a reused tea bag. "Morning," she mumbled, clutching her mug with both hands to steal its warmth. "Heating is off again." "I know," I said, opening the fridge. It was a barren landscape. Half a jar of mayo, a wilting bag of spinach, and a carton of milk that I prayed hadn't expired. "We're saving money on the bill, remember? That was the agreement." "I'm freezing, Elena," Jess sighed. "Is it worth it?" "If we want to pay off our loans before we're 80, yes." I grabbed the milk and poured a splash into my coffee. I drank it black, mostly because sugar cost money and cream was a luxury. I sat at our wobbly kitchen table and opened my banking app. This was my morning ritual, the ritual of anxiety. I stared at the number, $842.15. That had to last me 2 weeks. Rent was due in 10 days. My student loan payment was due in 5. I did the mental math, the same math I did every single morning. If I didn't eat out, if I walked to work instead of taking the subway, and if I didn't have any unexpected emergencies, I would have exactly $12 left over at the end of the month. $12. That was my safety net. I worked at a prestigious interior design firm downtown, Henderson & Co. It sounded fancy. My title, junior designer, sounded fancy. But the reality was that I was a glorified admin assistant who knew how to use CAD software. I spent my days picking out Italian marble tiles for penthouses I would never step foot in, and my nights eating instant ramen. I walked to work that morning, the cold wind whipping through my coat. It was a thin coat, another bargain. As I walked past the coffee shops, I smelled roasted beans and warm pastries. I saw people in tailored suits laughing, tapping their cards on the readers without even looking at the total. I felt a surge of bitterness in my chest. Must be nice, I thought. Must be nice to not have a calculator running in your head 24/7. I had convinced myself that this bitterness was a virtue. I told myself I was disciplined. I told myself I was frugal. But deep down, I wasn't being frugal. I was operating out of fear. I viewed money as a finite resource, like water in a drought. Every drop I spent was a drop gone forever. I got to work, my nose red and my fingers numb. I sat at my desk, tucked away in the back corner, and opened a spreadsheet. Not a design file, my budget. I adjusted the food column to $45. "Elena?" I jumped, minimizing the window. Mr. Henderson was standing there. He was a tall man with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my car. "Yes, Mr. Henderson? I need the specs for the Thorne penthouse by noon, and make sure you source the cheaper velvet for the curtains. The client is picky, but he won't know the difference." "Right, on it." He walked away, humming to himself. I looked at his back. He was wealthy, sure, but he was also miserable. He was always stressed, always yelling at contractors, always checking his stocks. He was just a richer version of me, just running on the treadmill wearing nicer shoes. I looked back at my screen. I had saved $5 in my budget. I felt a tiny hit of dopamine. Good job, Elena. You're safe. But as I looked around the gray office at the fluorescent lights humming overhead, I didn't feel safe. I felt trapped. Chapter 2. The Realization, the Price of Safety. 3 weeks later, I was still the queen of the budget. I had successfully managed to save an extra $20 by skipping dinner twice a week and eating the free bagels in the break room for lunch. I felt a grim sense of accomplishment. It was 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. The office was empty except for the cleaning crew and me. I was finishing up the mood boards for the Thorne project. I walked toward the break room to get water and saw the light in Mr. Henderson's office. The door was cracked open. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but his voice was loud. "I can't lose this account, Jerry. If Thorne walks, we miss quarterly targets. I've got 2 mortgages and the alimony. I can't float the payroll if he pulls out." I froze. Mr. Henderson, the man with the S-Class Mercedes and the Hamptons house, he was worried about making payroll? He sounded desperate. He sounded exactly like me when I looked at my bank account. I quietly backed away and went to my desk. I sat there in the silence, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. For years, I had a plan. The plan was work hard, keep your head down, get promoted to senior designer, make 6 figures, and finally breathe. Mr. Henderson was the end point of that plan. He was the success story, and he was drowning. I realized something terrifying in that moment. I was climbing a ladder that was leaning against a burning building. I pulled out my pay stub. I made $24 an hour. If I worked really hard, maybe next year I'd make $26. If I became a senior designer in 5 years, maybe I'd make $45. I did the math on a sticky note. $45 an hour times 40 hours times 52 weeks equals $93,600. After taxes, rent in the city, and living expenses, I would still be budgeting. I would still be worried. I had been trading my life for an hourly wage, thinking that if I just sold more hours, I'd be rich. But I ran out of hours before I ran out of bills. "Playing it safe is expensive," I whispered to the empty room. The realization hit me in the gut. My frugality wasn't a strategy for wealth, it was a strategy for survival. I was so focused on keeping what little I had that I had no energy left to figure out how to get more. I was playing defense, but you can't win a game if you never score. I packed up my bag. I didn't want to be Mr. Henderson. I didn't want to be the person shouting into a phone at 8 p.m. about quarterly targets. I walked home that night, and for the first time, I didn't look at the ground. I looked up at the skyscrapers, thousands of windows, thousands of lights. Behind some of those windows were people who weren't trading time for money, people who had figured out the code. I needed to find the code, but the universe, in its infinite sense of humor, decided to test me first. Chapter 3. The Challenge, the Broken Lease. I got home to find Jess sitting on the floor of our living room, a piece of paper in her hand. She looked pale. "What's wrong?" I asked, dropping my bag. "Is everyone okay?" She held up the paper. It was a letter from our landlord. "The building has been sold," she said, her voice trembling. "The new owners are renovating. We have 30 days to vacate." My stomach dropped. 30 days? They can't do that. They can. It's in the lease clause. I checked. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. Elena, even if we find a new place, have you seen the rents lately? A 2-bedroom in this area is going for $3,500 minimum. We're paying $2,200 now. I sat down next to her on the floor. My carefully calculated spreadsheet, the one where I saved $5 on mayo and walked to work, just went up in flames. A rent increase of that magnitude would bankrupt me. I literally didn't have the money. If my rent went up by $600 a month, I would be in the red. I would be borrowing money to live. I had to move further out, I said, my voice sounding hollow. Maybe Jersey or deep Queens. That adds 2 hours to our commute. The train tickets alone would eat up the savings. She was right. We were trapped. That night, I couldn't sleep. The anxiety was a physical weight on my chest. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan. This is it, I thought. This is what happens when you live on the edge. One push and you fall. I had spent my entire adult life trying to build a fortress out of coupons and sacrifices. But it wasn't a fortress. It was a house of cards. The wind had blown, and now I was exposed. The next morning, I went to work like a zombie. I had big, dark circles under my eyes. I had to go to the site of the Thorn penthouse, the project Mr. Henderson was so worried about. I arrived at the luxury building. The doorman let me in. I took the elevator to the 45th floor. The doors opened directly into the apartment. It was a construction zone, dust sheets everywhere, but the bones of the place were magnificent, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. I walked to the window. From up here, the people on the street looked like ants. The problems looked small. Incredible view, isn't it? I spun around. Standing there, holding a takeout coffee cup, was a man in jeans and a black t-shirt. He had messy gray hair and keen blue eyes. Yes, it's beautiful, I stammered. I assumed he was one of the contractors. I'm Elena from Henderson and Company. I'm just here to check the measurements for the curtains. The man smiled. I'm Marcus. He walked over to the window and stood next to me. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, Elena. Rough morning? I don't know why I answered him honestly. Maybe it was the lack of sleep. Maybe it was the sheer absurdity of standing in a $10 million apartment while knowing I might be homeless in a month. My landlord is kicking me out, I blurted out, and I can't afford to live in this city anymore. So yeah, rough morning. Marcus took a sip of his coffee. Money trouble? I budget every cent, I said defensively. I don't buy anything. I save everything, and it's still not enough. Marcus turned to me. He looked at me with an intensity that made me want to look away. You can't save your way to wealth, Elena. You can only produce your way there. Chapter 4. The Mentor, the 50-cent coffee lesson. I blinked. What? You're playing the wrong game, Marcus said calmly. He gestured to his coffee cup. It was from a high-end roaster down the street. How much do you think this coffee cost? $5, I guessed. Too much. $6.50, he corrected, and I bought it without thinking about it. Not because I'm arrogant, but because the $6 is irrelevant to my day. You're probably the type who walks 5 blocks to save 50 cents on a cup of joe, right? My face flushed. It adds up. Does it? Marcus laughed softly. Let's say you save 50 cents a day on coffee. That's $180 a year. Congratulations. You can buy one nice dinner. Meanwhile, the energy you spent worrying about that 50 cents, the willpower you used to deny yourself, what if you had used that energy to figure out how to make an extra $1,000? I stood there, stunned. It was exactly what I had been thinking about Mr. Henderson the night before. I'm Marcus Thorn, he said, extending a hand. My jaw dropped. You're the client? He am, and I've seen your work, Elena. The mood boards, they were good, but they were safe. You chose the beige linen. Why not the emerald velvet? Because the velvet was expensive. I was trying to keep the budget down for you. Marcus sighed. I didn't hire a designer to save me money. I hired a designer to create value. If that apartment looks like $1 million, I can sell it for 15 million. If it looks like a budget hotel, I get 12. You saving me $5,000 on curtains could cost me 3 million in resale value. He leaned in close. This is your problem, Elena. You think about cost. Wealthy people think about value. You think, how much does this cost me? I think, how much will this make me? He walked over to a stack of blueprints on a sawhorse table. You're talented, I can see it in the details, but you're designing from a place of fear. You're living your life from a place of fear. And fear is the most expensive thing in the world. He pulled a business card out of his pocket and handed it to me. I have a small commercial property in Brooklyn, a boutique hotel lobby. I need it done. Henderson is too busy with this place. If you want to pitch me a design, I'll listen. But here's the catch. You can't charge me hourly. How do I charge? I asked, trembling. You tell me what the transformation is worth to me, and you charge me a percentage of that value. Figure it out. He turned and walked toward the elevator. Don't bring me beige, Elena. Bring me bold. I stood alone in the empty penthouse holding the card. My hands were shaking. This was a side job, a freelance gig. Mr. Henderson didn't own me. Marcus Thorne had just handed me a shovel. Now I had to decide if I was brave enough to stop digging with a spoon. Chapter 5. The Strategy, Rewiring the Value System. I went home that night, but I didn't open my budgeting spreadsheet. I opened my sketchbook. Jess was in the kitchen packing boxes. Did you find a place? She asked hopelessly. Not yet, but I found a way out. I spent the next 3 nights not sleeping, but for a different reason. I was obsessed. I researched the boutique hotel market in Brooklyn. I looked at the competition. I realized that the hotels charging $400 a night had a specific vibe, industrial chic, art-focused, experiential. The ones charging $150 were generic. If Marcus wanted to charge top dollar, the lobby couldn't just be a waiting room. It had to be a destination. It had to be Instagrammable. I started designing. No beige, no safe choices. I designed a lobby with a living moss wall, custom neon lighting, and vintage velvet furniture. It was risky, it was loud, it was expensive. Then came the hard part, the quote. Old Elena would have calculated the hours. It will take me 40 hours at $50 an hour, that's $2,000. $2,000 would cover the deposit on a new apartment. It felt like a lot of money. But I remembered Marcus's voice. You saving me money could cost me millions in resale value. I did the math differently. If this design allowed him to increase the room rate by $20 a night across 50 rooms, that's thousands of dollars extra per day, $365,000 a year in pure profit. The value of my design wasn't my time. The value was the result. If I created $300K of value in the first year alone, what was that worth? 10%? That would be $30,000. My stomach churned. Asking for $30,000 for a design? It felt criminal. It felt impossible. I was a junior designer. Who was I to ask for that? That was the scarcity mindset talking, the voice that said, you are only worth what someone pays you per hour. I had to kill that voice. I wrote down the number, $15,000. It was a flat rate for the design concept and sourcing. No hours tracked, just the result. It was 7 times what I would have charged hourly. I looked at the number on the page. It terrified me. If he said no, I had nothing. If I charged $2,000, he'd probably say yes instantly. Safe or wealthy, I asked myself. You can't be both. I chose wealthy. Chapter 6, The Breakthrough, the $15,000 pitch. I met Marcus at a coffee shop on Saturday morning. I was wearing my best blazer, ironed to perfection. I had printed my presentation on high-quality paper, which cost $40. I didn't flinch. I laid out the renderings, the moss wall, the neon, the textures. Marcus looked at them in silence. He flipped the pages slowly. He didn't smile, he didn't frown. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Finally, he looked up. "This is aggressive." I said, "The market is crowded. The market is crowded. You don't want a lobby. You want a scene. You want people coming in just to take a photo, buying a drink at the bar, and tagging the hotel. This design isn't furniture. It's marketing." Marcus nodded slowly. "You're right. It works." He closed the folder. "So, what's the damage?" This was the moment of truth. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to say, "Whatever you think is fair," or $50 an hour. I took a breath. I looked him in the eye. "The design fee is $15,000. Flat rate, includes full specs and vendor coordination." Silence. The cafe noise seemed to fade away. Marcus stared at me. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to say, "Just kidding, I'll take $2,000. "15, Marcus said, rubbing his chin. "Considering this design positions you to raise RevPAR by 15% immediately," I said, using a term I had learned online the night before. "It pays for itself in the first month of operation." Marcus smiled, a real wide grin. "You listened," he said. He pulled a checkbook out of his jacket and poked it at me. "I was expecting you to say 3,000, he admitted as he wrote, "and I would have paid it, and I would have thought, she's a good worker." He tore the check out and slid it across the table. "But at 15,000, he said, "I think she's a partner. You just valued yourself, Elena, and because you believed it, I believe it." I looked at the check, $7,500, the deposit, the other half due on completion. $7,500 in my hand. That was 3 months of my salary at Henderson's. It was enough to secure a new apartment. It was enough to pay off a chunk of my loan. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me," Marcus said, standing up. "Delivering the value is the hard part. Now get to work." Chapter 7, The Transformation, Architect of Abundance. That afternoon, I walked back to my apartment. I passed the grocery store where I used to agonize over the price of spinach. I went inside. I bought the organic spinach. I bought the nice cheese. I bought a bottle of wine. I didn't look at the total. It wasn't that I was reckless. It was that I realized that saving $3 on cheese didn't matter when I had the ability to generate $15,000 with my mind. I got home and showed Jess the check. She screamed. We cried. We found a new apartment the next day, a nice one with sunlight and a dishwasher. I didn't quit my job immediately. I stayed at Henderson's for another 6 months, but the dynamic changed. I wasn't scared of Mr. Henderson anymore. I knew I had options. I knew my worth. Eventually, I did leave. I started my own studio. I don't charge hourly anymore. I charge for value. Some months I make $5,000. Some months I make $40,000. But I never, ever worry about the cost of a coffee. The mindset shift wasn't about getting money. It was about understanding what money actually is. Money is a certificate of value. If you want more money, you don't hoard what you have. You create more value for others. Scarcity tells you there's only one pie, and you have to fight for crumbs. Abundance tells you that you are the baker. You can bake as many pies as you want. My name is Elena. I used to be poor, not because I lacked money, but because I lacked vision. Now I'm wealthy, and it started the day I stopped counting the cost and started counting the value. Thank you for listening.